It's been a busy week. We've got a new forecast for the Canadian real estate market in 2023, an update from Rentals.ca and how much the price of rent continues to increase in Canada, and an article about a very disturbing trend among real estate agents in Canada that's finally getting some much needed attention. But of course, born 1 week early, which is why this video is coming out a little late, the newest member of the Prairie real estate family. I'd like everybody to meet 𝗬𝗲𝗲, and now I can officially start calling my terrible jokes bad dad jokes. So let's start off with one of those and then get into the news. I told my wife the other day she's really got to start embracing her mistakes. She walked over and gave me a hug. If you have a terrible joke that I can use in future episodes, put it in the comments below. Let's get into the news this week. The first article here is from RBC in the Financial Post. The title is, "Could Canada Become a Nation of Renters?" Of course, looking at all the data collected by Stats Canada in the most recent census. In this particular case, they're looking at the increase in renters. That's the number of people renting. That was increased 22%. But also home ownership, the number of those that are owning a home increased 8%. Of course, why are they both increasing? Well, we're seeing an increasing population in Canada, so the number of those that rent and the number of those that own a home will both increase. Now, I asked an interesting poll question, and the response was kind of what I thought it would be. I asked, which is the fastest growing demographic of renters in Canada, baby boomers or millennials? Of course, overwhelmingly, the answer to that question was millennials. But the correct answer is actually baby boomers. That right now is the fastest increasing demographic of renters. And if you look at it, it kind of makes a lot of sense. Right now, millennials are actually the largest home buying demographic in Canada. Baby boomers aren't buying a lot of houses. They obviously, most of them own their home right now, and they're now looking to downsize into a smaller place or going into an assisted living, both of which would mean that they're going into a rental property. So that's actually why baby boomers are the fastest growing rental demographic in Canada right now. This next article here is looking at the stress test. Of course, this is the time of year that the stress test gets reviewed. For those that don't know, the way the stress test works in Canada, if you were looking to get a mortgage, you must qualify on the stress test rate of 5.25%, which is what it is right now, or the 2% higher than what your quoted rate is, whichever one of those is higher. So let's say, for example, your mortgage rate was going to be 3%, you would have to qualify on the stress test rate of 5.25% because that would be higher. Now with interest rates at about 5 or 6%, depending whether you're looking at a fixed or a variable, now you're qualifying on 7 or 8%. So they've said they're not going to make any changes to the stress test this year. And I think we've seen now that having this stress test was a good policy. Of course, when it was put in, there was a lot of pushback on it, but we've seen a rapid increase of interest rates. And right now, of course, this is still early, but we're not seeing a huge amount of pressure being put on homeowners being forced to sell because they can't afford these higher interest rates. Of course, still lots that can happen in the future, but right now the stress test is showing that it was a good policy, and I'm glad that they're keeping things the way they are. Next up, LePage is out with its outlook for the 2023 real estate market in Canada, and they are forecasting a year-over-year decline of 1%, meaning this time next year, home prices will be 1% lower than they are today. Of course, RE/MAX came out and they were talking about a 3% year-over-year decline. Now, what they're showing here is about a 2% year-over-year decline in places like the GTA and Montreal. In Vancouver, they're talking about a 1% decline. They have said, and this kind of lines up with what seems like all the forecasts are saying right now, that prices will continue to decline until we get into the spring. And that's kind of where they're starting to expect things to flatten off and then start rebounding. Now, my 2022 recap video is going to be coming up pretty quick, and I'm going to look at the predictions that were made for the 2022 market and see how those end up turning out. And then we'll look at doing a 2023 forecast video. We'll wrap up all the different forecasts from the banks and economists, and I'll make my predictions that may turn out terrible, but we'll have to see in a year. So that video will be coming out here probably next week or two. Rentals.ca is out with its most recent monthly rental report for Canada. And I know there's been a few people saying that the price of rent, it's got to hit the peak here, or we've already hit the peak. Well, the information that Rentals.ca tracks shows that that's not the case. Year over year, rent prices have gone up 12.5% nationally. Of course, the GTA is one of those places that's seen a huge skyrocket in the price of rent, but there's a lot of hot pockets and areas that you probably wouldn't be surprised. I'm gonna put a link to this article, or the report itself, so you guys can check that out. But also, just in the last 3 months, rent has gone up about 4.5%. It's up month over month. And when they combine all the different property types that they keep track of, so studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, etc., the average price of rent is now over $2,000 a month in Canada. That's actually the highest that it's ever been, according to Rentals.ca. Now, this is something that when I read the article really, really frustrated me, and it should frustrate you as well. And they're talking about the trend of real estate agents ghosting clients. So they book a showing with the sellers and then they don't show up. Obviously, the buyers are frustrated. Sometimes the buyers may know, I guess they're going to cancel it, but they're not telling the sellers. Not only is this really frustrating, but it's just flat out unprofessional. Now, in the article here, they talk about it, well, it's younger agents and they don't have as much training. I'm sorry, I don't buy that excuse at all. That's utter crap. If you make an appointment, you show up to it. I get it, life happens, maybe you can't make it. You gotta phone the sellers and say, hey, something's come up. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be able to show your property today. We'll look at rescheduling. Everybody understands things happen, but you just not show up, flat out unprofessional. It shouldn't happen. And the fact that they're saying in this article, at least, that this is a trend that is on the rise in Canada, that's just not good. That's unprofessional. It shouldn't happen. I don't know how else to say it. What would you think if you had a showing booked on your house and then the person just never showed up? Let me know in the comments below. While you're here, you know what else you should do? Well, give me a like if you haven't already. Hit subscribe as well. Leave a comment. I love chatting with you guys in the comments. And check out this right here. That's my most recent monthly Canadian housing market update, the most comprehensive monthly update on YouTube. You're going to find a lot of useful information there. But as always, guys, thanks very much for watching.